Hare Krishna. Jaya Srila Prabhupada. This channel, Prabhupada Initiation, is a new channel and it's long overdue. I've been researching this topic for many years, came into Krishna consciousness or discovered Krishna consciousness in San Diego in 1993. So it's been almost close to 30 years. And for over the years, I read over all of Prabhupada's books and letters and listened to all the conversations and classes and all the teachings of Prabhupada. But I studied closely both sides of this debate. Basically, it's a debate issue about initiation. What are the instructions for initiation after Prabhupada's departure in 1977? So when I first came into Krishna consciousness, I was some of the first devotees that I met actually informed me that actually Prabhupada had set up this system to continue accepting disciples after his physical departure, and that system was never implemented. And so many persons have been elected as gurus, and so many have fell down, and there's been so many exposés of deviations, deviant behavior by persons who are elected into this position as initiating spiritual masters in Iskcon. So this was presented to me from the start. Many other people, I think there's many other devotees, though, who come along and they don't hear about this from the beginning. They may not hear about these things until later. And it's later on, it becomes more difficult. When you've already, put all your faith into the system that is already set up and going, it seems that for most devotees, it's difficult to change their belief system at that time. So in any case, but I wanted to really understand. I didn't really just take somebody's word for it. I really wanted to thoroughly understand what were Prabhupada's instructions. How could there be such a misunderstanding, and how could there be any question? Why wouldn't it have been just crystal clear for 100% of everybody? So essentially, this is the culmination of years of research, reading, looking at both sides of the issue, reading papers on both sides of this debate. And we have compiled a paper. Essentially, it's like a book. There's a lot of content there, and it is posted now on prabhupadinitiation.blogspot.com is where you can find read the whole document. And this has all of the quotes essentially supporting my conclusion. To tell you from the start, my conclusion is that I am supporting this understanding. This is what I consider to be the better understanding, is to accept Prabhupada as the initiating spiritual master. And the other system, the current system of accepting one of the Iskcon elected gurus, is it's something that's just very risky, really, for your spiritual life, I think, because it's not very clear if any of these persons are actually qualified. And we've seen many persons come and go. Many of the Iskcon gurus have been exposed and fallen down into sometimes abominable activity. Even recently, we had one long-standing Prabhupada disciple acting as an initiating guru who was exposed in a child molestation. And he frankly admitted it. I think under the circumstances, under pressure, he was exposed and had to come out and admit his mistake. So this has happened many times over and over again. So, but what I want to say is that this topic of initiation, to some persons are very, it's kind of like you have Democrat and Republican, and some are to the far right and some are to the far left, and then you have moderates. Well, this issue I find to be similar like that, because you have some extremists on one side that it has to be like this, some extremists on the other side, it has to be like this. moderates. There's some that are somewhat moderate, I suppose. But frankly, the vast majority of devotees, because they have been going along with, most devotees are, I think, inclined to accept whatever is whatever is the popular opinion. So, the popular opinion, I think, for at least probably, like, I don't know what the stats are, but it seems at least 95%, I would say, maybe even more, could even be 99% of devotees believe in the Iskcon system of these elected gurus. And most devotees do not really delve into the subject matter enough to really study it closely. They just take it for granted. They just take other people's words for it, that this is how Prabhupada left it and this is what Prabhupada wanted. It's hard for me to say what exactly the stats are because I haven't done a survey and I'm not, in contact with devotees around the world. I hear that in some places, we've had some reports in Mexico that there is a lot of devotees, at least in some region of Mexico, there was a lot of devotees that were coming around and starting to accept this understanding that as Prabhupada is the initiator. But for the vast majority, like most temples around the world, Iskcon temples, this has been going on now since 1977 for how many years we're talking now? Something like 50 years, close to 77, that's 45, something like 45 years, I think. So this has been going on for a long time, and it's pretty much become an established system that this is how it is. Most devotees believe Prabhupada wanted his disciples to initiate their own disciples, and this is how the movement would go on. However, when, as a result of my investigation in all the statements of Prabhupada in this regards, letters and statements, and looking at the histories and, testimonies of other devotees, you put it all together, for me, it's a much stronger position. There's much more stronger evidence, and to me, it's just a much better understanding of accepting Prabhupada as the initiator. However, that being said, I am making this first video to examine a couple of statements that I think are some of the most significant statements in this whole issue. Of all the statements that Prabhupada has made, I think this particular statements that I'm going to show you here, I think really get right to the heart of the matter as to why there is two sides of the issue, or why there is two parties, even more parties. I mean, nowadays there's devotees of different camps and different versions of different understandings and different perspectives. But generally you have, the two parties. One party is, the belief that you have to have this physically present initiating spiritual master to accept a disciple. And then the other party is the the belief that Prabhupada set up this Ritvik initiation system, where he authorized disciples to perform this function of initiation on his behalf. And they would, at their own discrepancy, and Prabhupada left it up to their discrepancy to, decide who was qualified to accept. This was the system that Prabhupada set up. And he referred to this system several times when he was asked, even by Newsweek magazine, a major national magazine, when they asked Prabhupada what's going to happen after your departure. He didn't say that my disciples are going to initiate their own disciples. He said, I've selected some to act as representatives and they will have their own zones. He talked about this zonal system. So I intend to make more and more videos to go through this paper and talk about this subject matter. We have the link here. You'll find the link for the paper in prabhupadinitiation.blogspot.com. You can there you can see all the statements. It thoroughly covers all these statements on this subject matter. But these particular statements here I find to be the most interesting, because I will frankly say that after years of studying this issue, I find that there are many statements which can lead one to this conclusion that Prabhupada, has intended his disciples to initiate their own disciples. However, I find there to be other more stronger statements that I think supersede those statements, which I think are more important, which are to me are the final consideration. Because when you take in Prabhupada's teachings, you could find many things where Prabhupada said one thing here and then he said something which seems to be different over here. So you have to, consider all the circumstances. You have to look at all the quotes together. You have to take things, put them in context. And for me, when you put everything into perspective, the most prominent instructions are that one should be very careful to accept an uttama adhikari. So here, in this statement, this one really gets to the point here. It says, well, the first class devotee, this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 3rd chapter, text 21. It says, the first class devotee does not at all see anyone who is not in the service of the Lord, but the second class devotee makes distinctions between devotees and non-devotees. The second class devotees are therefore meant for preaching work, and as referred to in the above verse, they must loudly preach the glories of the Lord. The second class devotee accepts disciples from the section of third class devotees or non-devotees. Sometimes the first class devotee also comes down to the category of the second class devotee for preaching work. So here, there is some concession for second class devotees. Prabhupada is saying here, the second class devotees accept disciples. Now, that can also be open to some interpretation, whether it actually means to initiate them as their own disciples, or preaching and being a shiksha guru or an instructor, which is basically like a priest, is the equivalent of a priest in the church. Like a priest is, there's Jesus Christ is the pure devotee, and then there's the representatives who are priests, and they are like, representatives via mediums. But the priest doesn't say, go through me, I am your savior. He says, Jesus is the one, is ultimately your savior. I'm just a guide. So a shiksha guru could also be, or a second class devotee can also act as a shiksha guru and be like a guide for others. Doesn't mean that they have to formally initiate their own disciples. So, but this verse, it doesn't actually clarify whether we're talking about formal initiation. So it's somewhat, it can be taken that way. It can be taken that, well, Prabhupada says right here, second class devotees, they can accept their own disciples. In this next verse, this one is from Nectar of Instruction. Prabhupada says, one should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained the platform of uttama adhikari. A neophyte Vaishnava or a Vaishnava situated on the intermediate platform can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform, and it should be understood that they cannot advance very well toward the ultimate goal of life under his insufficient guidance. Therefore, a disciple should be careful to accept an uttama adhikari as a spiritual master. So this verse for me is the most relevant verse to this whole issue. Of all the other verses, this verse really sums it all up, because Prabhupada is saying here clearly that first he says one should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained the platform of an uttama adhikari. So here we can understand that Prabhupada is talking about an initiating spiritual master, because initiating spiritual master is on the highest platform. He accepts his own disciples. He should be a pure devotee. He must be authorized by his spiritual master. So one should not take that position unless they're an uttama adhikari, which uttama adhikari essentially means they're completely pure, free of any material desires. This is a first-class pure devotee. That's uttama adhikari. So, but then Prabhupada in the very next sentence, he makes a concession. Like he says, one should not even do that, but a neophyte Vaishnava or a Vaishnava situated on the intermediate platform can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform. They cannot advance very well under his insufficient guidance. So he's like making a concession there. He goes from saying they should not even be a spiritual master to the next sentence to actually making almost saying something different. Well, actually though they can do that, but it's not actually advisable. See, therefore, in the last, he summarizes, concludes, therefore, a disciple should be careful to accept an uttama adhikari as a spiritual master. So you can argue one way or the other, say it has to be like this or it has to be like that. But the way I see it, according to this verse, it can be either way. But Prabhupada is not actually advising that. And this is what Iskcon essentially has done. They have taken the lesser instruction. They've accepted this system where men are, voted into this position. And so many men are voted into this position of initiating spiritual master, and the only qualification is that they're supposedly like chanting 16 rounds and following the principles for I don't know how long, a few years maybe, or so. I don't know exactly what their standard is nowadays, but they have something like that. So someone who's in Iskcon and they seem to be like a good preacher or something, and they're supposedly following and chanting their rounds, then they're put up for nomination. They're nominated to this position. And if they get the vote, then they're basically crowned this position of initiating spiritual master, which Prabhupada defines the initiating spiritual master is to be worshipped as good as God. And this is really the distinction. In one sense, it's a Chintya Beta Beta Tattva, because they're simultaneously one and different. The Shiksha Guru and the Diksha Guru, they're both guides and preachers, but the Diksha Guru, Prabhupada makes a distinction that one should only have one Diksha Guru, and that's because that is the primary Guru who is the recipient of one's devotional service, and they're the one who initiates a disciple and takes their karma. And so that spiritual master must be pure and powerful in order to absorb the karma, and he must be a pure devotee, free of any material motive, self-motivation, because he's to be worshipped on par with God, on the same level as Krishna. So we have many other statements here where it's clearly stated that the initiating spiritual master is worshipped as good as God. He's worshipped as a pure representative of God. So Prabhupada's advising here, one should be careful to accept an uttama adhikari. So the thing is that in Iskcon, it can be, it's who knows other than Prabhupada. We can all agree that Prabhupada is a first class devotee. He's an uttama adhikari. But other persons, who really knows? Who can really say? Like a lot of devotees will accept that, such and such, he's a first class devotee, he's an uttama adhikari. So, they'll see that someone seems to be a preacher, they've been around for so many years, they're doing preaching and all these devotional activities, it seems. So people will believe that they're an uttama adhikari, that they're on the first class platform. But we've seen time and time again where such persons end up falling down and being exposed. Either it can be usually some type of illicit activity with either women or even children. There's been child molestation. There's been, just these situations that come about where these persons are exposed. Sometimes we had an example recently, a few years back. There was one guru that passed on. Before he passed away, he was feeling guilty that he was addicted to pornography all these years while he was initiating disciples. So before he died, he fessed up. He wrote a letter saying, please excuse me, I've been, addicted to pornography all these years. I've been accepting disciples. So this has been going on. This is, just all these kind of circumstances. We've had a lot of devotees may not know the histories, but the histories, according to the histories of many of the initiating gurus, there's been so many fall downs, and many devotees have taken one guru, and then he falls down, and they get reinitiated, and they change their name, sometimes 2 and 3 times. I've heard of devotees that reinitiated and changing their names a few times, going from one guru to the next. So in this age of Kali Yuga, this is the age of everything is upside down, everything's topsy-turvy, there's so much cheating, there's so much illusion in this age of Kali Yuga. So, and we ourselves are imperfect souls. We're subject to illusion. It says there in the Bhagavatam that conditioned soul makes mistakes, is subject to illusion and cheating. So, we're trying to be devotees, but we're still subject to make mistakes. So it's very difficult to differentiate actually who is actually a 100% pure devotee, Uttama Adhikari on the first class platform. But anybody can understand that Prabhupada, if anybody is a pure devotee, it's Prabhupada. Prabhupada has set the example, has set the standard. And it's very easy for anybody in the world to come to Krishna consciousness and accept, oh, here's a first-class devotee. And they could accept him as their spiritual master. And then, there can be a formal initiation that's conducted by one of Prabhupada's disciples. But with so many other persons and gurus, even if the qualifications of a spiritual master, of an Uttama Adhikari, well, one would assume that if one's an Uttama Adhikari, then they can be recognized by, and it does say this, an Uttama Adhikari can be recognized by his ability to preach and how he influences so many people. So, but still, we can see that there's these gurus, internet gurus, and persons like Sai Baba who had, persons who had millions of followers. Prabhupada didn't acknowledge Sai Baba as a bona fide spiritual master, yet he had so many followers. There's other gurus online that may have many followers. So having, because one has a big following, that itself is not a qualification that one is actually a pure devotee. One could have a big following and still be, a cheater, actually. They can be misleading people in one way or another. So, as Prabhupada says, if you take things literally in Prabhupada's instructions, that one should be careful to accept an Uttama Adhikari, because a cheating guru can mislead one. We may think we're on a spiritual path, but we may actually be going backwards, not making progress. We may be becoming just more into illusion. We're following someone who has material motivations and is not giving us the pure understanding, not giving us pure Krishna consciousness. So being a topmost pure devotee is very, it's uncommon, let's say. We like to think that there's many pure devotees out there, but, really, I think on the strictly speaking, an Uttama Adhikari pure devotee like Prabhupada or someone like Christ is just a very phenomenally uncommon personality. So, we may think that someone is on the first class platform because they seem to be a great preacher and they give classes and kirtans and stuff, but it's hard to tell who is doing what behind the scenes. And even if one is even strictly celibate, but one still may have subtle material desires. Even on a more advanced level of devotion, one can still harbor, the seeds of material desires. And that is the subtler desires are name and fame and distinction and honor and having fame and followers and fortune. So one might not be a guru that's, having sex behind the scenes or have a sex cult or is, secretly having an affair behind the scenes, a sexual affair. But maybe they're even celibate, but they still have this subtle desire to have power, to have recognition, distinction, a position. All this kind of stuff can be going on. So it's very hard for us as a conditioned soul to really discriminate who is actually a first-class pure devotee. And really, what makes a lot more sense in this Kali Yuga is to just have a very clear system where the spiritual master is the Jagat Guru, the spiritual master for the whole universe, the spiritual master for the whole world, someone that everybody can clearly come to and not have to speculate and wonder who is an actual pure devotee. It can be presented, here is Prabhupada, he is the true spiritual master, he's a pure devotee. You don't have to guess and gamble with your spiritual life and surrender yourself to someone who is going to turn out being a child molester or have, a swinging singles thing going on behind the scenes or something, just who knows. Very clear from the start, just Prabhupada. Prabhupada is the spiritual master. We don't have to speculate, and we don't have to have this kind of cheating thing going on. So this system also makes it very much, this system of, so many multiple initiating gurus makes it very open to cheating. So much cheating that can go on where anybody with motivations, material motivations, can come into Iskcon and go through the routines of following and join the club and get an approval to be worshipped as good as God. So, the conditioned soul, we're supposed to be here because we have this desire to lord over. Well, we can't become God, but one can become a guru and be worshipped as good as God. That's practically the next best thing. So this is very much seems to be a motivation, and it can be very tricky for people to really to spot that in these Iskcon gurus. They may seem to be like very pucka and very, very good, but it's very hard for a conditioned soul to really discriminate exactly what is going on in their mind and in their soul, and how pure they actually really are. So therefore, Prabhupada is discouraging this. He's not just totally banning it altogether. He says, they can. It's like they can, but they shouldn't, because they should be careful to accept an uttama adhikari. So in that light, there's another verse along the same lines here that's in the Krishna book in chapter 52. It says, in the Bhagavad Gita, the worship of demigods is condemned, but not forbidden. Interesting. Condemned, but not forbidden. Okay. There it is clearly stated that the less intelligent class of men worship the different kinds of demigods for material benefit. So it seems to be exactly along the same lines with this previous verse, that they can accept disciples, but they shouldn't. They shouldn't even become a guru, and one should be careful to accept an uttama adhikari. So this is the same thing. It's for less intelligent. It seems to be the general mass of devotees who are going along with this system. Let's frankly say that these are less intelligent persons, or they just haven't done their homework. They haven't done their investigation. A lot of people may join Iskcon, and it's much easier to join when you have an organization. There's things going on. They have the festivals, and everything seems to be all in place. It's a lot easier to join along with that than to join along with the accepting of the Ritvik understanding, where the vast majority don't accept that. So for most people, they're just going to go with the flow. They're going to join Iskcon. It's much easier to have people want to have friends. They want to be part of something. They want to feel that support. Or then some persons, they want to have followers. And all of these things, all of these kind of material benefits that will come along with joining this organization. So a lot of people will go for that, and that's the mainstream. That's the mainstream thing. That's what most people are going to go for. So it takes more intelligence to really understand Prabhupada. You would think that most devotees, though, after seeing this Iskcon system of gurus falling down over the years, there's been so many fall downs. They even had the zonal system in place, because that's what Prabhupada instructed. And they had this zonal system in place for the first 11 years. And there's an admission in the Back to Godhead magazine. I think we could stop and look at that, because this is a very important thing. Prabhupada wanted this zonal system. He set it up for Ritvik representatives. And you would only have a zonal system if you're having, representatives initiating on Prabhupada's behalf. That's the purpose of a zonal system. And that's why they had a zonal system for 11 years after Prabhupada's departure. And then they stopped the zonal system. Why? Because they never executed it properly. They claimed themselves to be the acharyas, and there was all kinds of competition and grand worship, and there was all kinds of fiasco and scandals went on, and there was even stories of murders and drug use and intoxication, and all kinds of craziness and breaking of principles in the name of Krishna consciousness. And this was more or less swept. All this history is there if you do this research and you dig in. But for most devotees, this stuff is hidden. I think it's swept under the carpet. Or devotees, when they hear about this stuff, they don't really want to process it. And it's hard for them to accept that the whole thing could not be right, that the whole Iskcon system could be deviated. So, for most people, when they hear about the Ritvik system, it seems to be like, oh, these Ritvik people are just deviant, envious devotees. They don't accept the parampara. They don't want to accept a guru. So most people are conditioned. They've been, this type of rationale has been given over the years to, convince the masses of devotees that this is the system Prabhupada wants, is electing these gurus, and it doesn't matter if they fall down year after year. So many of them fall down, we'll just keep on electing more. So let's take a brief We're going to look at this statement. It's an admission in the Back to Godhead magazine. This is for the record of history. Okay, so here it is. It's called, the title of the article is An Apology. And this is an article that was printed in Back to Godhead in the January-February issue 1991. So here it says, I'm going to try to get this off the screen here. Oh. Okay, so in the difficult times after Srila Prabhupada departed from this world, misunderstandings arose on a crucial issue. And by the way, this article is written by Editor-in-Chief Jayadvaita Swami, who also happens to be one of today's initiating Iskcon gurus, if I'm not mistaken. So in the difficult times after Srila Prabhupada departed from this world, misunderstandings arose on a crucial issue. Who would be the next spiritual master? And again, this is after the 11 years of the 10 or 11 years that the zonal system went on, and all the fiasco and scandals of gurus and fall downs and exposés. It was clear that something was not right. So many gurus falling down. The movement was divided into different camps, and there was competitions going on in different zones for amassing disciples and followers. So it was just a big mess, and it was dividing the movement up. So finally, they came to what they called guru reform. They said, "Oh, we got to do something about this." But their guru reform was not to implement the Ritvik system. It was to simply just add more gurus. Instead of just limiting it to 11 gurus with each having their own zone, they stopped zones and then they added more gurus to the bunch. Instead of 11, today it's over 100 or something, I believe. So, continuing with the article, in the difficult times after Srila Prabhupada departed from this world, misunderstandings arose on a crucial issue. Who would be the next spiritual master? Srila Prabhupada had clearly taught that he wanted all his disciples to follow his teachings, teach them to others, and thus become spiritual masters. But by the influence of Maya, illusion, a different idea soon evolved, that Srila Prabhupada had appointed 11 pure devotees to serve as the gurus after him. These 11, the idea went, should each serve as the spiritual master for a specific geographical zone of the world. This zonal guru system, as it came to be called, prevailed in Iskcon for about 10 years until its falseness became clear and an ever-growing reform movement overthrew it and reasserted Srila Prabhupada's original instructions. In 1986, Iskcon's governing body commission formally dismantled the system. In the years till then, Back to Godhead sometimes reflected and supported the erroneous zonal guru system. Here, therefore, we wish to admit this mistake. I was the managing editor for some of those years, and Satsvarup Das Goswami was editor-in-chief. He joins me in apologizing to our readers for BTG's conformity to the zonal guru error. In particular, we express our heartfelt apologies for contributing to the hurts and wrongs devotees endured when Iskcon diverged from Srila Prabhupada's instructions. May Lord Krishna henceforward keep us straight on the path of Krishna consciousness as Srila Prabhupada taught it. Hare Krishna Jayadvaita Swami. So I'll read the next section. My comment on this is, ironically, by tricks of chance, as Srila Prabhupada says, the author prays, may Lord Krishna henceforward, which is coincidentally the same word in the July 9th letter, that to continue this Ritvik system henceforward, just happens to use that same word here. May Lord Krishna henceforward keep us straight on the path. Yet, unfortunately, the so-called ever-growing reform movement, which supposedly reasserted Srila Prabhupada's original instructions, only further complicated the situation by rubber stamping many more unauthorized initiating gurus. Years later, Jayadvaita Swami again frankly admitted the continued fall downs of Iskcon gurus of the so-called reform movement in his following statement, where the Ritvik people are right. Yet, ironically, he continued supporting the system. In this statement, he described the result of the so-called reform, a system of voting in over 100 initiating gurus, a system which continued to disregard the instruction that a Diksha guru must have a qualification and a specific order to initiate. If it is very clear to Iskcon leaders precisely how Srila Prabhupada wanted so many persons to become Diksha Gurus within Iskcon, then why did the GBC initially set up the zonal Acharya system, where Diksha Guruship was strictly limited to 11 persons, and allow it to run for almost an entire decade? The above-mentioned reform movement, referred as a reform movement, went on to position now more than 100 initiating gurus in Iskcon by a GBC voting commission, which has nominated 90% of its own members as gurus. This alternative system has introduced a new philosophy that the initiating spiritual master can be less than 100% pure, and places more emphasis on a spiritual master having a physical body than on having actually the qualification of Uttama Adhikari, one who is completely pure, free of all material desires, and who actually sees Lord Krishna face to face. The following statements were made years later after the above-mentioned so-called reform movement, also known as the Guru Reform. Jayadvaita Swami to this day remains a supporter of the current Iskcon Multiple Gurus program, despite the following admissions. Interestingly, he also happens to be one of the main editors who continue making endless changes to Prabhupada's books, which is a whole other topic. But it's all connected to this. So Jayadvaita Swami, he wrote that article saying, may we henceforward, get back on track. We made a mistake. May Lord Krishna, henceforward set us on the right path. And then they go on to, open it up to over 100 or more initiating gurus. And then some years later, again, many, many fall downs. After fall downs continue again and again, he again writes a paper that he states, fact, Iskcon gurus in good standing have fallen. Fact, Iskcon GBC has supported even fallen gurus and tried to paper over their fall downs. Fact, Iskcon gurus have opposed, oppressed, and driven out many sincere God brothers and God sisters. Fact, Iskcon gurus have usurped and misused money and diverted other Iskcon resources for their own personal prestige and sense gratification. Fact, Iskcon gurus have had illicit sexual intercourse with both women and men, and possibly children as well. And this was a recent incident with Lokanath Swami. The letter is there online. His admission of a molestation incident with a young child, female child. So, and I think he's only been put on probation for a few years or something like that, with the possibility of being reinstated again to continue initiating. So again, fact, some Iskcon gurus still in good standing have had such serious personal difficulties that the GBC has been obliged to suspend them from initiating. Fact, other Iskcon gurus have snapped back into line only after narrow misses. Fact, Iskcon gurus recently led a movement advocating a premature and inappropriate emphasis on Rashika Bhakti. Fact, some Iskcon devotees have felt obliged to accept a new guru twice or even 3 times over. So this is the guru. Yes, so this is the current system since 1977. It has gone on like this. Nothing really has changed at all much. Iskcon continues to vote in, more gurus, even though fall downs continue to happen. And it's just really the lesser understanding of the teaching of Krishna consciousness, the high principles and the high standard of bhakti that Prabhupada has given. They've taken, the vast majority of devotees have taken the cheaper interpretation of Prabhupada's teachings, that they believe anybody can take this position of the initiating guru. Well, not just anybody, but at least someone who's been supposedly following for a few years. But other than that, it does, who really knows if someone is actually qualified. So we've seen time and time again so many fall downs. So they had this system. Where did they get this idea for this system for 12 years or 10, 12 years? They had this zonal system. Why did they have that system? Because Prabhupada instructed for that system. That's the system that Prabhupada instructed. And it only is appropriate to have a zonal system when you have, representatives or initiating, or called officiating acharyas or Ritvik representatives conducting initiations on behalf of Prabhupada. That's the only thing where it makes sense to have a zonal system. So they did away with this zonal system. Prabhupada, I'm going to show you another quote here where Prabhupada referred to this zonal system when he was asked about the future after he departs. So here we've got an interview in Newsweek magazine on July 14th, 1976. July, Prabhupada passed away in 1977. Was it November 1977? So this is just a little more over a year before Prabhupada's departure. Newsweek magazine interviewer asks, I was wondering if he had a successor. Do you have a successor to take? All right, true. Try that. I accidentally turned the phone. Interviewer, I was wondering if you had a successor to do. Do you have a successor to take your place when you die? Prabhupada, not settled up. Not yet settled up. Not yet settled up. Interview. So, what process with the Hare Krishnas? Prabhupada, we have got secretaries. They are managing. Rameshwar, he has appointed from all the disciples a group of secretaries. Each one is in charge of a different sector of the world. Interviewer, how many secretaries? Rameshwar, presently there is 18. Interviewer, and so that group of 18 secretaries will choose another leader? Prabhupada, I am training each one of them as leaders so they can spread extensively. That is my idea. So, Prabhupada referred to this zonal system on a number of occasions when they asked about, how things would go on. Here's another one. What happens when that inevitable time comes when a successor is needed? Rameshwar, he's asking about the future. Who will guide the movement in the future? Prabhupada, they will guide. I am training them. Interviewer, will there be one spiritual leader though? Prabhupada, no. I am training GBC, 18 all over the world. So again, he refers to these 18 zones. So there's just so much more overwhelming evidence that Prabhupada had intended this zonal system. He said specifically that when they asked him how things went, in Vrindavan before he passed on, they asked him in that conversation, in May 28th conversation, and he said, I will select somebody to act as Ritvik. So there's overwhelming evidences, and then in Prabhupada's will also it says only his initiated disciple can be the managers of Iskcon properties. So there was just much more evidence. As far as I'm concerned, there's way more evidence, a much stronger position to accept Prabhupada as the initiator, and that he has intended this zonal system to carry on to initiate disciples on his behalf. So even though formal initiations might not be taking place, ultimately Prabhupada says real initiation is following, reading his books, following his instructions. So the formal ceremony is not completely necessary. It helps, but in the absence of a system to perform the formal initiation, devotees can simply chant, follow Prabhupada's instructions, and accept Prabhupada as their spiritual master. And one asks, well, how will they know Prabhupada has accepted them? Well, Prabhupada says you can know if you're following. If you follow, then Prabhupada accepts. Simple as that. So if you're following, or you're making, you're really sincere and you're trying to follow, and Prabhupada we're going to get Prabhupada's mercy by following his program, reading his books, and trying to, purify our lives and be devotees. So we don't have to wonder about who is a bona fide guru, and going to India to look for another guru, this one and that one. Devotees are going all over the place. They accept this guru, and then some years later it's another guru. And so devotees it's a whole mix-up. It's very clear in this system that Prabhupada is the initiator, and we don't have to speculate and go all over the place looking for another guru. So I hope that has been helpful to you. I thank you for joining me today for this talk. And Hare Krishna Jai Srila Prabhupada.